Mali. So today I want to share with you guys a little bit about the story from section 10.4. It's called the Delhi Sultanate. And our goal for this lesson is to figure out how, after all of the war and conflict we've seen in some of our previous lessons, you think about like the Umayyad Caliphate or the revolutions that led up to the Abbasid Caliphate, there was some conflicts going on. How is it that eventually peace will be reached? And especially some of these places where conflict was really, really fierce. Let's talk a little bit about the map you may or may not have started, depending on the class you're in. At the point of about the year 1000, the Muslims had done an incredibly effective job of conquering lands, expanding out from where everything started. You might remember where Islam started, the city of Mecca. Now, once they reach their maximum extension, there's a really big issue. You have all of this space and you run out of people to run it. And so the Muslim empire towards the year 1000 is starting to reach into places like central India, like what is nowadays Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan. And we see that on the fringes, Islam is starting to have influence. Of course, they wanted to spread their religion. That's their number one thing. And of course, everyone likes a little bit of power and money at the same time. But how are you going to pull it off when you roll into a place like India that's got millions of people already running something in their own way? It wasn't easy. And so our goal for the next 10 minutes is to figure out how, despite conflict, the Muslims and the Hindus of India were able to reach a decent peace where they could coexist together. That is not something that happens often in history at this time period. So this is a special case, and we really want to honor this case by examining what actually it looks like. So you probably have some space with your gold sheet where you could take some observations, but I'm going to give you a little more than you need now. Your objective is to be able to reflect on examples of how Muslims and Hindus managed to live together. So I'm going to be following along here with a little bit of guided notes. You can take them or you can listen carefully. Choose what you think will best support you later to fill out your gold sheet. So let's get started and talk a little bit about the Sultanate of Delhi. And I hope you can read this. The Sultanate of Delhi was one of those conquered places that the Muslims rolled into and set up shop at one point. Now, obviously, when you roll into a new place conquering, it's going to be a lot of conflict involved. And so the Sultanate of Delhi sets up shop really in this territory. This is an exact drawing, obviously, and also they had influence elsewhere. But centered around the city of Delhi, the Sultan, a Muslim king, sets up shop. Now, this Muslim king, the Sultan, there were various sultans, just a title. The Sultan rolls into this area and sets up shop. Problem, though, it's really hard to change a government and conquer all of its people overnight. So let's see the process that went on. First and foremost, we start to see Muslims entering and attacking India by the year 1000 or so. We start to see them creeping in and starting to try and gain some influence. No? However, at the same time, it's hard to establish relationships locally because the difference in religion. The Sultan, that's a vocab term. The Sultan was a Muslim king. Oh, look at that, almost fit to the border of China. And obviously, as we know from 7th grade, not like anyone ever forgets anything from 7th grade, we know that India was Hindu in the majority at the time. And of course, Buddhism was there, and there were some Zoroastrians there. There were some other religions, but by and large, it's a very Hindu country at the time period. So how is this Sultan going to build an empire, set up shop in a place that's really loaded with people, very different from him? Let's see if we can expand the story a little more. Not that one. There we go. All right. So in the Sultanate of Delhi, we really start to see an evolution and a change in attitudes of people. Because really, the Sultan, when he rolls in with his army, of course, army, terrifying, scary, bad, but they also had a bunch of really wonderful technological, artistic, and medical advances that they brought with them. That was a huge perk for the people who are now conquered. Obviously, no one wants to be conquered. I don't really feel like that's in my journey for the day. But if you are conquered, at least be conquered by someone who's going to bring you some benefits. And so once the Sultan rolls in, sets up shop, and Delhi, the Sultanate of Delhi, becomes a Muslim empire, we start to see some wonderful changes. The arts, or let's call it advances. Let's call this section advances. So we see arts flourish. Really, they start to develop a true identity and a true image. Very exciting for a place that has just recently been conquered. Trade explodes. And it's so impressive. The key was this. Once the Sultan rolls in as a Muslim, the Indians now have a connection to trade with all those other places that have now become Muslim as well. So they instantly get the plug to trade with anyone from India all the way over to Morocco and Spain. They gain a whole lot of trade allies, and that's very, very useful for them. In addition to that, you start to see a true sense of, I want to say, almost like technology, organization. There's like a plan going on now in the Sultanate of Delhi. The country or the empire organizes more. Instead of little states here and there doing their own thing, it starts to tighten up ship, which is really, really exciting. Nevertheless, this wasn't a watershed moment. There wasn't a moment where everyone in India woke up and went, oh my God, we're all family now. Let's all play nice and do stuff for the greater good. The conquest still leaves a sour taste in the mouth of a whole lot of Hindus. So we start to see in here, in addition, Muslim-Hindu conflicts. It's not all sunshine and daisies. There's going to be some issues. First and foremost, the obvious one, their religion. Hindus have many gods and castes. You might remember from 7th grade that in India, historically, way back when, people were born into castes or certain social levels that they had to stay in for the rest of their lives. So if you were born in India, you were stuck in your caste. You were born low, you stay low. You were born high, you stay high. In comparison, Muslims have one God. And they really have freedom to move their level up and down, to build a name for yourself, or you could also ruin your name for yourself. So now we have these two trying to live together. There were religious conflicts. There was still violence going on, even though arts and trade and wealth and technology and organization was blooming. This is still a big difference, but give it time. And that's what they did. They followed that motto, give it time. So at the end of the day, we really start to see, with time, the two learn to coexist. They gave it time, and some new amazing fusion items were born. First and foremost, language. A new language was born over time that unified the people of the Sultanate. It's called Urdu. It's spoken in India and Pakistan today, by the way. It's called Urdu. That was born. There were some conversions. Some Hindus jumped ship and moved over to Islam. There was a new religion that was a combo. It was like a fusion of the two. Not everyone went for it, but some people created and followed along this fusion. It's called Sikhism. So here's some really good examples of combination things that happened over time that kind of started to bring people together, but there was one thing that really, really clinched it, one thing that locked them together. And it goes back down to that initial idea of how you're going to run a government, run a country where your people often are on two sides of the spectrum. The Sultan decided to make a very important decision. One of the sultans did. The sultans allowed local Hindu leaders to share power. That's a big one, teamwork. They understood very well that in India, they weren't going to be able to overnight unite people religiously. But if the Sultan established relationships with local leaders, the Rajas, which I'll write that in a second, they would be able to then create a place where Hindus would listen to the Sultan. If the Sultan brought Hindus into his government, then Hindus might be more willing to listen. And so these local Hindu leaders that would share power, they're called Rajas. Okay, a Raja is a Hindu leader who's working within the Sultan's Muslim government. And finally, people in many parts of the Sultanate of Delhi felt like they were a part of all of this. They could even still be a Hindu who never learned Urdu, that never converted, that isn't a Sikh. He still could identify with the government. And we pause and we use this example in chapter 10.4 to reflect on how essential it is sometimes for people to just feel included, to make progress happen. Hindus and Muslims lived on two different sides of the aisle for a long time. And it wasn't until the government made an active effort to bring everyone to the table that they could really, really thrive and enjoy all of the benefits of what they had. The Sultanate of Delhi was very wealthy and very, very successful in its 300 years of history or so. And I think, in my opinion, the real essential item for us is this: making sure as many voices are heard to keep the peace. And so this has been 10.4 on the Muslim conquest of India. And I really would like for you to reflect on a couple of the examples you've seen here of how you can overcome conflict and challenges by making some smart decisions. Thanks.